December 27th, 2025, Buddhadhamma. We're in chapter 10.5. As we were talking about yesterday, about the two motivating forces prompting that allows human beings to act. And yesterday we were talking about craving and desire, which one is tanha in Pali, the other one is chanta, desire, or in wholesome desire, wholesome enthusiasm. Two of the motivating factors of why human beings act and make decisions. 10.5, craving and wholesome desire. Tanha, meaning pleasure, delight, desire, lust, and longing that is unwholesome, unhealthy, and unsupportive. And chanta, pleasure, delight, desire, love, aspiration that is wholesome, that is healthy, and that is supportive. Motivation of craving. So tanha can be translated as a thirst, craving, yearning, infatuation, fervor, lust, agitation, anxiety, and instability. According to the teaching of Patisamupata, dependent origination, tanha is conditioned by feeling, vedana, rooted in avijja, which is ignorance. When one perceives a pleasurable or displeasurable sense impression, one sees it as delightful or loathsome visual form. For example, hears a melodious or a gratifying sound and feels either pleasure, pain, or neutral feeling. Craving arises in one form or another. If one experiences pleasure, then one is glad, delighted, satisfied, fascinated, enthralled, and covetous. If one feels pain, then one is displeased, dissatisfied, and averse. One wishes to escape or wish for the feeling to disappear. If one feels a neutral feeling, then one remains indifferent and complacent. These reactions occur automatically. They require no thinking or understanding. If a person, on the other hand, reflects on other and with understanding the process, if one knows that loathsome visual objects is beneficial or melodious sound is in fact an alarm signaling danger, one is aware that the object is unsuitable on the grounds of ethical or cultural considerations, then craving can be severed and the habitual process can be replaced by a new form of behavior. Craving is dependent on feeling and is reinforced by ignorance. It rests upon feeling and is grounded in ignorance. Because craving is directly tied up with feeling, a person with craving searches for things that will provide pleasure, pleasing, delightful feelings. There are 6 distinct things that can provide feeling: visual forms, sounds, smells, tastes, tactile objects, and mental objects, ayatana. The first 5, sight, sound, smell, tastes, and tangible objects, are connected with the material world and are particularly pronounced. They are referred as the 5 objects of sensual enjoyment, kama guna. This also is known as the 5 chords or the strands of sensual pleasure. The 6 sense-based ayatana are especially the 5 objects of sensual enjoyments, are both the aim and the source of craving. Craving is thus the thirst for things and provides sensation, and the thirst for pleasing sense objects, a desire for pleasing sense objects in order to experience delightful feelings. In brief, craving is the desire to acquire. Craving has further repercussions. The experience of contacting sense object and experiencing feelings gives rise to a mistaken belief that there is a stable, lasting self that experiences these feelings. Accompany this belief in a stable, lasting self is the craving for this self to endure. But this biased belief is merely an idea, that it is not based in reality. It tends to generate an opposing belief that inclines in the opposite direction, that the self exists only temporarily, that it is impermanent and will eventually disappear. These beliefs are connected to Vedana, feelings resulting from basa, contact with sense objects. The existence of the self, atta, is defined and determined by experience of sukha, pleasant feelings. When a person is gratified by sense contact, basa, the tanha, the craving for the stability of the self, the atta, is intensified. But when the person is not gratified by sense contact, then the stability of the self loses significance. If the dissatisfaction with the sense contact is strong, then there arises an aversion for the stability of the self. A person wishes for the self to be separated from that present state of existence or craves for the destruction of the self. This alternative form of craving for an annihilation of the self goes hand in hand with the belief that the self exists temporarily and will eventually disappear. These two forms of craving for stability of the self and for the self-annihilation exist as a pair and lie in juxtaposition to one another. The first kind of tanha, craving, a desire for a pleasant sense object, is also a desire for sense object to satisfy the self or a desire for the self to express pleasant feelings from sense objects. All forms of tanha, craving, merges at the sense or serve a sense of self, atta. People allow these different forms of tanha, craving, to direct the course of life by pandering to them, nourishing them, faithfully obeying to them. They are the source of all problems, both personal and social. They generate expectation. They generate fear. They generate doubt. They generate anger. They generate hostility. They generate carelessness, apamado. They generate obsession, and they generate conflict. There are three distinct kinds of tanha, craving. Kama tanha, craving for a pleasure sense object to satisfy a sense of self, craving for sensuality. Bhava tanha, craving for the importance, stability, and immortality of the self, craving for existence. Vibhava tanha, craving for the destruction, escape, or annihilation of the self, craving for non-existence. In brief, these three kinds of tanha, craving, can be referred as craving for sense pleasure, craving for existence, and craving for non-existence. According to Buddha's teaching on the mode of continuality, paccayakara, craving leads to seeking, pariyesana or esana, the search to obtain desired objects, which results in acquisition. The acquisition of the desired objects marks the end of one stage in the conditional process. Before examining this process more closely, take note that seeking is not the same as doing, and seeking may not involve any form of physical action, as well as we will discuss below. Motivation of wholesome desire, chanta. At this point, let's return to the term chanta, which we have defined as desire for wholesome qualities. Kusala Dhamma Chanta, love of virtue. Kusala Dhamma Chanta, love of truth. Dhamma Chanta. Now, Kusala Dhamma Chanta is translated as the desire for wholesome qualities and enthusiasm for the delight in virtue. We compare this term with kusala dhamma asantuti, or asantutita kusalesu dhammisu, discontentment in regard to the wholesome qualities, which is the essential factor for supporting Gautama's Buddha's enlightenment and the factor of all Dhamma practitioners should possess in tandem with perseverance. Kusala chanda is translated as love of virtue. Although the term Dhamma is removed, kusala chanda has an identical meaning to kusala dhamma chanda. Kusala may be translated as wholesome, skillful, favorable, proficient, healthy. It refers to things that are beneficial to a person's life, things that promote wellness, things that promote prosperity for an individual and for the society abroad, a whole. Dhamma chanda is translated as love of truth, desire for truth. The term Dhamma often has a general meaning referring to a thing or teaching, but in this context, its meaning is far more reaching. Here, Dhamma has two principal meanings. First, truth, or teaching that reveals the truth. The second, virtue, goodness, virtuous qualities, and, to some extent, ethics. Dhammachanta can thus be rendered as love of truth, love of virtue, desire for truth, and the desire for virtue. The desire for truth points always towards knowledge. A person wants to know the truth, to realize the truth, to recognize the true meaning, true essence, true value of things. And the desire for virtue is linked to action. A person wishes to generate goodness. Dhammachanta can therefore be translated as intent. Intent on truth. Love of truth, intent on goodness or love of goodness. It includes an aspiration for knowledge, a desire to act, an earnestness to act. A simple definition for Dhammachanta is intent on truth. With the understanding that all aforementioned explanations are included in this definition in a similar fashion, the term chanta on its own can also be translated as intent on truth. Chanta desires truth and virtue. It desires knowledge of truth. It desires to act in order to give rise to goodness, to produce truly beneficial results. Chanta is related to action, specifically action performed in order to know the truth and to create goodness. Why is that when wholesome desire, kusala dhamma chanta, is mentioned in text, it is usually linked to the desire to act, katu kamyata? The desire for knowledge and goodness solicits action. In order to arrive at knowledge, truth, and fulfillment, one must act. To use a play on words, to access the real one must have zeal. For this reason, the desire to act is the attribute of wholesome desire of the love of truth. One can even say the term chanta is synonymous for katu kamyata. The desire to act is wholesome desire. Sooner or later, when the text mentions wholesome desire, kusala chanda, or love of truth, dhamma chanta, they normally conclude by stating that chanta is equivalent to the desire to act. In reference to the mode of continuality, pachayakara, Gautama Buddha said that chanta leads to perseverance, usaha, or mentioned above, chanta as the preceding effort, vayama, or energy, virya. Put simply, chanta generates action, just as tanha generates seeking. Related to this subject, the commentary says that the cause of the wholesome desire, chanta, is wise reflection, yoniso manasikara. This passage indicates that wholesome desire is part of a continual process involving wisdom. Wholesome desire commences when a person begins to apply wisdom, just as the rising of craving depends on ignorance. Now, we come to a comparative analysis. To sum it up, craving, tanha, is focused on vedana, is focused on the feeling aspect, and desire objects in order to experience feeling, or desire objects for personal gratification. Craving is generated and sustained by ignorance. It is linked to personal issues. It centers around a sense of self. It leads to seeking. Wholesome desire, chanta, is focused on well-being, on what is truly beneficial, on the quality of life. It desires truth, goodness, and virtue. It desires fulfillment and wholesomeness. Chanta is generated form of wise reflection. It is an objective. It is not bound up with the sense of self, and it leads to energy, effort, and action. There are 2 points requiring special emphasis. 1, when analyzing whether a person's actions, including thoughts and speech, are dictated by craving or not, one can use the following criteria. Desires or actions that are tied up with the search for gratifying sensations that protect or promote the stability of fixed sense of self, including a deeper level of undermining of the self, or matters that fall under the category of craving. 2, the passages craving leading to seeking, chanta leads to action. They're very helpful in distinguishing between these 2 qualities. This distinction has a critical bearing on ethics and on Dhamma practice, which will be discussed below. Craving desires things in order to experience feeling, and the gratification of craving is achieved through the acquisition of these things. Any method used by craving to acquire gratifying objects is referred to by the term seeking pariyesana. The method for acquiring these things vary. Some methods acquire actions, while other methods, for example, someone else provides the objects, do not require action. In the case that action is required, however, the object desired by craving does not have a direct causal relationship to the action. For example, Mr. Simon Paul is a janitor and gets a monthly salary of $300. If you finish reading this book, Mr. Paul will take you out to the movies. Many people would think that the janitorial work is the cause for receiving the salary. Cleaning is the cause, and the salary is the result. Such a conclusion, however, is false. It stems from an habitual self-deceptive way of reasoning. For the statement to be accurate, one must insert missing clauses. The action of cleaning results in clean building. A clean building is the true result of cleaning. Receiving a salary for cleaning is merely the result of an agreement made by certain individuals. There is no certain causal relationship between these 2 events. Some people who clean buildings receive no money, and most people receive a salary without having to clean buildings. The second example is similar. Many people will think that reading the book is the cause and going to the movie is the results, but in fact, the true results of reading a book is the gaining of knowledge. To finish reading the book is merely a condition for going to the movies. In the first example, if Mr. Simon Paul's behavior is compelled by craving, then he cleans only because cleaning is the requirement of getting money. He does not desire a clean building. He does not want to sweep and clean. The second example, the child wishes to go to the movies. he or she reads the book only because if the condition for getting the object desired by craving is to see a movie, he or she does not desire the knowledge contained in that book. He or she has no wish to read the book. Strictly speaking, craving does not lead to action, nor does it generate a desire to act. In these cases, action is merely one possible method, following a pre-arranged agreement used for attaining sought-after objects according to the needs of craving. These two examples also clarify the quality of chanta, which desires virtue, truth, and knowledge of the truth. With chanta, Mr. Simon Paul would desire a clean building, and the child would desire the knowledge from the book. Both individuals desire the direct results of these actions. The results appeal to the causes. The results have determined the course of action. Action is equivalent to generating desired results. Cause and effects are immediately linked. When Mr. Simon Paul sweeps, cleanness arises, and it arises every time he sweeps. When the child reads, knowledge arises, and it continues to arise the more the child reads. Chanta desires the virtue resulting from action, and thus also desires the action itself, which is the cause for that virtue. In this case, chanta leads to action and leads to the desire to act. This helps to explain why the second kind of chanta, khatu kamyata chanta, the desire to act, is equivalent to kusala chanta or dhamma chanta, the desire for virtue or truth. If the behavior is guided by chanta, Mr. Simon Paul will have an enthusiasm for sweeping the building that is distinct from receiving a salary. And the child will read the book without his or her father enticement to see a movie. There are many other ethical implications to these two forms of desire, but at this point, simply remember the distinction that craving is the desire to consume or experience, while chanta is the desire for truth and action. Now, we come to problems arising from a set of preconditions. The ethical and practical consequences of using either craving or chanta as a motivation for action vary greatly. When a person using craving as the motivation, action is merely a prerequisite for obtaining desirable objects in order to satisfy the sense of the self. The person does not directly desire the action or the results of the action. His or her direct aim is to obtain the desired objects. In many instances, the required action is merely one method of obtaining the desired objects. Therefore, if one is able to find a method of obtaining these things without having to act, one will use this method and avoid doing anything, because obtaining the desired objects without having to work is most capable with craving. And if it is impossible to avoid action, then one will act reluctantly, unwittingly, and without real enthusiasm. The consequences of craving are as follows. One tries to avoid having to perform the prearranged action. One may seek a shortcut or an easy alternative to acquire the desired object without having to work. This avoidance may even lead people to behave immorally. For example, if Mr. Simon Paul wants money, has no enthusiasm or dedication to his work, and feels he cannot wait, he may seek money by stealing. If the girl cannot put up with reading the book, she may steal money from her mother and go see the movie alone rather than wait for her father to take her. When one craves to acquire and has no desire to act, one will perform required actions simply to get them over with. Act is hastily fashioned, or the act to convenience others that one is accomplished by the deed. The result is a lack of percussion or precision and excellence in one's work. One will develop bad habits like disinterest in achievement, negligence, and half-heartedness. For example, if Mr. Simon Paul may joylessly sweep day in and day out, waiting for his salary, the girl may read the book in a distracted way without gaining any knowledge, or deceive her father by reading only the first, middle, and final page and claim she has finished it. When the original agreements have been breached, these arises underachievement, carelessness, avoidance, and deception. As a consequence, strict secondary precautions needed to establish the support and protection, but this is only attempting to be synonymous, making the entire system more complicated and confusing. For example, it may be necessary to find a superior or an inspector for Mr. Simon Paul's work and to verify the hours he has spent working. It may be necessary to have an elder sibling check on the girl, or else the father may need to cross-examine her on the book's content. When craving dictates behavior in response to these secondary terms and conditions, new layers of faulty and immoral conduct arises until the entire system becomes disputed or useless. When the desired object differs from the direct results of action, then the value of actions cannot be measured by its results. Because the action is being performed to serve some other goal. In such a case, there is an imbalance between the action and the desired results. The behavior of people who aim for desired objects expected under the terms of an agreement is likely to be either excessive or deficient. And it's likely to be inadequate for realizing the beneficial, virtuous results stemming directly from that action. People then determine the value of action by the acquisition of desired objects. The basic rule for action performed as a prerequisite for acquiring desired sense object, or a distinctive rule for craving, tanha, is: the more I obtain desirable things, the more I act. Or, the more I experience delightful feelings, the more I act. Action based on this premise is never ending, and the process is flip-sided of: if I do not acquire desirable objects, I won't act. Or if I don't experience delightful feelings, I will remain idle. Apart from being defective and miss opportunity, action that is performed by result and different from its direct beneficial results also creates negative effects. A simple example is that the eating when a person eats purely with craving. And if the food is delicious, he will eat it till he is bloated. If the food does not appeal to his desires, then he will eat little, leading to discomfort and sickness. The action is eating, which results in adequate nourishment for the body and is prerequisite for experiencing delicious tastes. The negative effects of tanha, craving, are widespread and will be discussed in further examples below. In the case that action and the thing desired by craving are not directly aligned by causes and effect, craving is adverse to action, resists work. Craving attempts to avoid work by trying to obtain things through no effort at all. And when this is essential to act, then people acting with craving, following prescribed terms and conditions, tend to find no joy or satisfaction either in the action itself or its fruits of their labor. The things desired by craving abide virtually in isolation, disconnected from the deed. As long as one does not acquire the desired objects, the craving for these things remain, and acting to fulfill certain preconditions may further incite craving, leading to disturbance and anxiety. The state of mind of someone who acts with craving is restless, confused, stressed, and nervous, and is often accompanied by other unwholesome qualities like fear, distrust, and envy. A lack of fulfillment and dissatisfaction can lead to several personal problems like stress and mental illness. When these problems extend outwards, they create difficulty for one's life in general and causes affliction for others. Now we come to the benefits for wholesome desire. People who apply chanta, wholesome desire, As the motivation for action, on the other hand, wishes for direct results of action. And therefore, they also want to act. The consequences of wholesome desire are opposite to the consequence of craving. Wholesome desire leads to upright behavior, diligence, and honesty, to sincerity in relation to one's work, and to steadfast allegiance to the natural law of causality. Wholesome desire creates an enthusiasm for work. It leads to precision and excellence in relation to one's work, a wish for success, to the earnest behavior, and to being undaunted by work. Instead of a complicated system of control and mutual fault finding, there's cooperation, coordinated effort between people, because each individual wishes for the success of the work rather than the yearning for personal gratifying objects, which are scarce and must be competed for. Because the action is performed on its own direct results, the value of the action can be measured by its results. There is a balance between the action and the desired results. A person acts in order to give rise to its beneficial results. For example, one eats the proper amount to meet the needs of the body and to promote health without being enslaved by delicious flavors. When one desires the direct results of action of one's to generate these results, one also realizes the intermediate benefits that arises during the course of action. The wish to act and the reaping benefits of action leads to satisfaction, contentment, happiness, and a deep sense of peace. In the context of the Dhamma practice, chanta is classified as one of the paths to power, itipata, which is a virtual principle for developing concentration, samadhi. Wholesome desire brings about concentration, which Gautama Buddha called concentration as the results of desire, chanta samadhi. Wholesome desire promotes mental health, opposing to craving, which creates mental illness. Even in the case when people is unable to fully accomplish the results of an action, wholesome desire does not create suffering or mental problems. Whether the action bears fruit or not, it proceeds according to the causes and effect. The effects are consistent with the causes. The causes, along with any obstructing conditions, naturally give rise to specific results. Wholesome desire does not create suffering because people who act with such desire have an understanding of causality, recognize the direct results of their actions. Suffering only arises when craving is given the opportunity to interfere. For example, when one worries that people will be critical for not succeeding or compare one's accomplishment with the success of others. Now we come to the act of eating subject to preconditions. Following are some everyday examples of these principles. When the body is unfed, then it requires food for nourishment for sustaining life. The need for food manifests as hunger, which can be distinguished at the first stage of acting of eating. Hunger is the function of the physical body and is classified as a result, vipaka. From the perspective of ethics, it is neutral, neither good nor bad, neither wholesome or unwholesome. Even arihats experience hunger. Hunger is a stimulus. It prompts the act of eating. It conditions the behavior of eating. If one is very hungry, one eats a lot. If not very hungry, one eats less. Hunger, however, is not the sole conditioning factor for eating. There are other reasons why people eat. At the second stage of eating for ordinary unawakened beings, another incentive or motivation comes into play and determines behavior along with hunger, the force of craving. There are two kinds of craving that are manifest at this stage. First is the struggle to protect the security of the self, the craving for existence, Buddhadhamma. which is obvious in time of greater hunger or starvation. Craving generates anxiety, agitation, and fear of death, accompanying the normal discomforts of going without food. The stress that fear will be commensurate to the degree of craving at the point that the person seeks food. When craving directs behavior, the search for food tends to be desperate and disregards ethical consideration. The second kind of craving is the craving for sense pleasure, kama tanha, the hunger for delightful sensation. The craving for sense pleasure combines with physical hunger to condition behavior, either as the support or as an obstruction. This is similar to two people who are in competition for material gains. If both gain, they help each other. If only one party gains, they are in conflict. If hunger is the sole factor, then the degree of hunger determines the amount of food a person eats. If craving is the sole factor, then the degree of delicious flavors determines the amount of food consumed. This is, however, the whole hypothetical argument. Usually craving never allows hunger to be the sole determining factor. Craving also intervenes, and when hunger and craving exist as co-determinants, hunger obliges craving by helping to enhance the experience of delicious flavor. But hunger can only help to a limited extent. It cannot always accommodate the desire of craving. As a consequence, a person may be very hungry, but the food is not tasty, and he eats too little. Or he is not hungry, but the food is delicious, and he overeats. Or he is only a little bit hungry, and the food is not tasty, so he refuses to eat anything. Hunger is a warning, announcing the body's requirements. When a person eats to satisfy hunger, the body receives adequate nourishment. The direct results of eating is nourishing the body. But when a person eats with craving, eats to experience delicious flavors, then he sometimes eats too little and other times too much, which can harm the body. In this case of craving, tasting delicious flavor is dependent upon the act of eating, but it is not as a direct result. Eating is the direct cause for nourishing the body, but it is a prerequisite for gratification of tanha, craving. Tanha, craving, does not necessarily want to eat, nor is it particularly interested in the needs of the body. Craving only wants delicious flavors. Eating is merely a requirement to obtain these flavors. There is no other option but to eat. The tastier the food, the more one eats. One does not consider the body's needs and limitations. Similarly, if the food does not taste good, one refuses to eat. Moreover, one may feel the entire process of chewing and swallowing is tiresome, disagreeable, exhausting. In this case, the body is a recipient of the act of eating, but without the person necessarily intending to nourish the body. Figuratively speaking, the body is one part in discussion, while the person eating with craving is another party. When the body is undernourished, it requires food, but it cannot eat on its own. It relies on the person to provide it with food. When people are inattentive to the body's needs or only grudgingly taking an interest in proper diet, the body suffers. Occasionally, when the body is famished, it must complain and grumble in order to get people's attention. When the body sends the slightest signs of distress, people hasten to eat. The body looks for ways to entice people to eat by offering the reward of experience, delicious tastes. Sometimes the body is not hungry and does not send any signal of discomfort, but people come across delicious food and eat more than the body requires. Eating has implication for both parties. For the body, eating results in rejuvenation, while the person eating results in obtaining delicious flavors. In fact, most people do not want to eat. They only want to experience delicious tastes. If someone were required to eat 2 plates of insipid food, he would have to force himself to do so. Insipid food. But if the food were delicious, then he may not be able to wait for the 3rd plate to arrive. When the body offers an incentive for people to eat, it simply waits. People will eat delicious foods from their own incentive, and the body obtains required nourishment accordingly. This method for enticement by the body, however, can be harmful and backfire. If one lacks the ability to consider and reflect, one may be utterly deceived by the body and only search for desirable flavors. As a consequence, the body suffers. Sometimes one does not even eat enough because the food is not delicious. Sometimes the food is tasty and one is not only eating more than is necessary, but overeats to the extent of causing illness. The act of eating then does not provide the suitable results of attending to the body's needs. Moreover, those people who are enticed by delicious flavors often create trouble and distress for other people. Now we come to pre-creation and sense pleasure. A similar pre-creation to the use a metaphor, the life force which desired to procreate, or the biological need to produce or reproduce, is one part in debate, while the person who experiences sensation is another party. The living organism desires to maintain the continuum of its genes, but it is unable to achieve this goal on its own. It requires assistance from people themselves. To effectuate this goal, the life force seduces people with the reward of pleasant sensation, especially through the physical contact in the act of reproduction. Sexual intercourse has implication for both parties. For the life force, it means a continuation of the species. For people, it means obtaining pleasurable feelings. At this stage, the life force is untroubled. It simply waits passively. When people act according to their desires, the life force receives the desired effects accordingly. But when someone acts not out of wish to propagate the species, which is the direct result of action, but rather because it is prerequisite for the obtaining pleasant sensation, the action is imbalanced. The craving to experience pleasure through sexual intercourse may lead to many forms of harmful and extreme behavior, spreading sexually transmitted diseases and generating crime, affecting both the individual and the society at large. The matter of reproduction is more complex than the act of eating. The imbalance here extends further than the relationship between the action and the desired results. People who seduce into action often end up betraying the life force, which is the partner in the intentional action. The individual people only want to experience pleasure and have no wish to provide the life force, which is desired goal of reproduction. They act unilaterally in order to experience pleasure and gratify desire, at the same time obstructing life and preventing it from obtaining any results of its action. This alone is acceptable, but when tanha, craving, increases, people behave offensively and take advantage of or defraud the life force. Their sole interest is in pleasure. They think up ways to intensify this pleasure. They devise methods to stimulate and spread the fires of tanha, craving, to increase the passions in experiencing sense contact. They create the instruments to experience the most extravagant, heightened sense pleasure possible, as can be seen today by proliferation of entertainment centers and various places of licentiousness. In the activity of reproduction, people pay no attention to offer no opportunity to the biological needs. They apply for similar attitudes of neglect or other activities like eating, giving rise to various widespread addictions. People should deal with this matter of reproduction in ways that are beneficial to themselves and the communities by fostering sincerity and goodwill. They should develop wisdom which recognizes true objective of desire within the order of nature, so they practice moderation and avoid indulgence. In this way, people's action will satisfy both the genuine needs of nature and the personal needs of individuals in a balanced way. Otherwise, the so-called civilization will end in ruin and devour itself, bereft of peace and happiness. Now we come to eating in moderation. Let us return to the subject of eating. As mentioned earlier, there are two factors conditioning a person's behavior in relation to eating: hunger and craving. Indeed, there are similar conditioning factors that may play a participatory role in the act of eating: chanta, a desire for truth or a love of goodness. In the case of hunger, wholesome desire, chanta, wishes for a truly beneficial state of being. It desires a healthy or optimal existence. It desires favorable conditions for life, health, ease, and absence of illness, a freedom from difficulties and from burdens more than occur naturally, and a convenience for performing one's responsibility, especially in regard to spiritual development. The process in which wholesome desire, chanta, arises is different from process of giving rise to tanha, craving. Craving arises wrapped in ignorance. When encountering an agreeable object, one is pleased. When encountering a disagreeable object, one is displeased. Craving follows automatically from feeling, without a person needing to think or to have any understanding of the process. The process involving wholesome desire, chanta, is one of ending ignorance. It is a process of wisdom, of applying thought, understanding, and awareness. When one eats, reflection and awareness are involved. One does not allow the indiscriminate reaction of craving to arise along with associated sensation, vedana. The process of ignorance and craving ends or abates and is replaced by the process of cessation, nirodha. The first factor to eliminate ignorance and to cut off tanha is yoniso manasikara, wise reflection, which can also be translated as skillful consideration, correct thinking, or analytical reasoning. Wise reflection, yoniso manasikara, here investigates in this way: what is the results of eating? What is the purpose of eating? It is aware that the reason for eating is to nourish the body, to promote health and ease, and that it is natural, healthy state of existence, and conducive to performing one's duties. One does not eat primarily for delicious favors, amusement, or beautification, which would be detrimental to one's health, lead to the exportation of others, increase defilements, and to be unfavorable to the truly desired results of eating. Wise reflection, yoniso manasikara, is not in itself a motivating force, but it conditions the wholesome motivation of chanta, which is the cause that leads to enthusiasm, a desire for health and ease of the body, for a good and suitable state of existence. Chanta becomes the third motivating force in the act of eating. It aligns with hunger, both alternates with and blocks tanha, craving. If strong enough, it even cuts off any opportunity for craving to arise. In the context of eating, chanta generates moderation to eat just enough. In the act of eating, there are thus three conditioning factors for motivation: hunger, which is specific to the activity and is inherently neutral from a moral perspective, and craving and chanta, which are wide-ranging motivation, opposed with one another. Craving is unwholesome and harmful. Chanta is wholesome and beneficial.